Throughout history, the interaction between conquerors or colonizers and the conquered or colonized peoples often involved complex dynamics of cultural exchange, assimilation, and sometimes the appropriation or suppression of the culture of those who were captive. A common practice was for conquerors to impose their own culture, language, religion, and social norms on the people they conquered. This resulted in the erosion or loss of the original culture, identities, and traditions of the subjugated people. For example, European colonization often involved efforts to civilize already cultivated groups, but according to European standards, which frequently meant undermining native cultures and forcing European cultural practices upon them. Cultural appropriation as a concept involves members of a dominating culture adopting elements of a culture of people who have been systematically oppressed by that dominating group. While cultural exchange can happen naturally between groups through intercultural communication and shared experiences, cultural appropriation usually refers to a situation where the cultural elements are used outside of their original cultural context, often without understanding or respect for their significance, and where there might be an imbalance of power or historical context of oppression. Examples of actions that could be considered as cultural appropriation or cultural identity theft by conquerors include: number one, using sacred symbols for fashion or decoration without understanding or respecting their significance. Number two, enforcing the conqueror's language and banning the group's original tongue, thereby eroding linguistic heritage. Number three, taking credit for cultural or technological innovations developed by the conquered cultural group. Number four, profiting from the commercialization of traditional cultural expressions, crafts, or knowledge without permission or benefit to the original culture bearers. Number five, imposing the conqueror's religion on the conquered population, often accompanied by the demonization or outlawing of indigenous religious practices. This could involve the destruction of sacred sites, the persecution of religious figures, and the suppression of religious ceremonies and rituals, which were integral to the conquered people's cultural identity. Number six, appropriating elements of the conquered people's religion, incorporating them into the conquering culture's religious practices. This can involve adopting deities, myths, rituals, and ceremonies from the subjugated culture, reinterpreting or redefining them to fit the conqueror's religious framework, thereby often stripping them of their original significance and context. This kind of syncretism could result in the dilution or distortion of the original spiritual practices. Cultural theft differs from benign cultural exchange. They represent two ends of the spectrum in the interaction between cultures. Cultural theft, often synonymous with cultural appropriation, occurs when members of a dominating group take elements without permission from a culture of people whom they are oppressing, or who have been historically oppressed by the dominant groups. Characteristics of cultural theft include a power imbalance. A power imbalance usually involves a situation where there is an unequal relationship between the two cultures involved. Exploitation. The dominating culture exploits these cultural elements for its benefit, often in a commercial or financial sense. Lack of respect. The adopted cultural elements are often stripped of their original meaning, used out of context, or not presented with the respect they warrant within their original culture. Erosion of original culture. It can contribute to the homogenization and loss of identity of the oppressed culture, as their cultural elements are detached from their roots and history. What is a benign cultural exchange? A benign cultural exchange, on the other hand, is a mutual sharing where both cultures interact and exchange ideas, traditions, and practices in a way that is respectful and appreciative. Characteristics of benign cultural exchange include mutuality. There is generally a sense of equality between the groups in exchange. No single group is exerting power or dominance over the other. Consent and participation. Exchanges occur with the consent and often with the active participation of members from both cultures. Respect and attribution. Cultural elements are shared with respect and understanding of their significance, and original creators or cultural bearers are acknowledged and credited. Cultural enrichment. The interaction leads to mutual enrichment of both cultures, fostering understanding and appreciation without undermining or erasing either culture. In benign cultural exchange, the aim is often to learn from one another and to celebrate the diversity and vibrancy of different traditions in a way that honors their source, while cultural theft disregards the balance and respect required for such exchanges to be considered ethical or equitable. Whitewashing refers to a form of cultural theft that involves the intentional erasure or alteration of the cultural identity and heritage of marginalized ethnic groups, predominantly through the lens of white superiority, supremacy, and dominance. It perpetuates a narrative that privileges whiteness and suppresses the voices, experiences, and contributions of melanated peoples, particularly Black people. There are several ways in which whitewashing operates as a form of cultural theft. Number one, decontextualization and appropriation. Whitewashing often involves appropriating elements of a marginalized culture without acknowledging or understanding their historical, social, and cultural context. This results in the detachment of cultural symbols, practices, or aesthetics from their original meaning and significance. Number two, denial of authenticity. By whitewashing cultural narratives, marginalized communities are denied the opportunity to authentically represent their own experiences and perspectives, leading to a distorted and shallow portrayal of their culture. This perpetuates stereotypes and reinforces power imbalances. Number three, economic exploitation. Whitewashing can contribute to the economic exploitation of marginalized communities. When aspects of their culture are co opted and commodified without proper credit or compensation, it derives the originating communities of the potential economic benefit and reinforces a system of exploitation. Number four, erosion of cultural identity. Whitewashing can contribute to the erasure of cultural identities as the dominant culture appropriates, rebrands, or dilutes cultural practices, style, or aesthetics, often robbing marginalized groups of their unique heritage and reducing their contributions to footnotes within the broader narrative. Number five, power dynamics. Whitewashing often occurs within the context of historic and current power imbalances, where the dominating group reinforces its influence and control over cultural narratives, perpetuating falsehoods and repressing alternative narratives and perspectives. It is of the utmost importance that we seize our power to reclaim and celebrate our own culture in a manner that acknowledges and respects our rich history, traditions, and contributions. Requisite to this is addressing the harm caused by whitewashing, boldly amplifying our voices, creating platforms for authentic cultural representation, and silencing false narratives and stereotypes, while fostering internal dialogue that respects and values our unique cultural expressions and experiences. Removing the pathology of white supremacy before it infects another generation's minds, thoughts, and actions necessitates that we operate with forensic precision. Do you know the difference between supremacy and excellence? Supremacy refers to the state of being superior or dominant in a particular domain or aspect. It often conveys a sense of utmost authority or control over others. On the other hand, excellence refers to the quality of being outstanding in a particular skill, talent, performance, or achievement. The association of supremacy with thoughts of grandeur can lead to psychological conditions that require immediate medical attention. Though I am not a medical practitioner, I can recognize a few signs of those conditions. Number one, narcissism and inflated self perception. The belief in one's supremacy can be associated with narcissistic tendencies, where individuals have an inflated sense of self importance and a constant need for validation. Number two, disregard for others. A sense of supremacy can lead individuals to overlook the thoughts, feelings, and needs of others. This can result in a lack of empathy and an inability to form healthy relationships. Number three, toxic behavior and aggression. When individuals perceive themselves as superior, they may engage in toxic behavior, such as belittling others, aggression, or the manipulation of others to maintain their perceived dominant position. Number four, impaired decision making. The belief in one's supremacy can lead to overconfidence and a lack of consideration for alternative perspectives. This can result in poor decision making and an increased likelihood of making mistakes. Given these potential psychological implications, it is important to address the condition of supremacy linked to thoughts of grandeur. Seeking immediate attention can help individuals gain awareness of their behavior, challenge their beliefs, and develop healthier thought patterns and behaviors. This may involve accepting the truth, therapy, self reflection, and personal growth practices that promote humility and a balanced self perception. America suffers from supremacy pathology, yet evokes collective fallible memory when approached with the truth, albeit makes confessions slowly and lacks confidence in its ownership of its actions. I am, however, more than obliged, compelled, if you must know, to set the record straight and let them reflect that I will speak the truth. The debt America owes to Black people for the cultural appropriation and theft, starting from the original sin of slavery up until the present is an unignorable case that demands acknowledgement, recognition, and compensatory restitutive actions. From the moment of capture and enslavement, we were forced into a heathen culture, and ours was systematically suppressed, overshadowed, and co opted for the benefit of this dominating, wicked society. It is incumbent upon us to declare that we were not illiterate when captured and enslaved. We possessed our languages, oral traditions, and extensive forms of communication that were distinct from the heathen's dominating culture. This key foundational fact challenges the narrative that we were inherently devoid of knowledge, excellence, governance, or intelligence. The forcible suppression of our languages and imposition of the dominating group's language left an indelible mark on future generations, as evidenced by disparities within the system of U.S. education. The legacy of cultural theft and linguistic oppression is evident in the inadequate representation of true Black history, literature, and art within educational curricula. The erasure of our fundamental contributions in building world civilizations, the absence of our original languages as a legitimate area of study, and the neglect of authentic narratives and experiences all perpetuate a sense of cultural inferiority, and all in exchange for or in favor of Greco Roman fables, myths, and fairy tales with no provable ancient origins. The erasure of facts fosters a harmful cycle that is injurious to learning, restricts our self expression, and undermines the overall identity development of Black children while programming them to believe lies. Black people have endured the trauma of having their languages, spiritual beliefs, artistic expressions, and cultural practices forcibly stripped away, commodified, and often misappropriated without consent or recognition. The profound contributions of Black people to the foundations of American culture, from music, dance, literature, fashion, cuisine, to language, have been deceptively undervalued, while our cultural innovations have been stolen and appropriated to be profited from by others. This ongoing debt is not merely a matter of monetary compensation, but sparks us to call for and carry out the enforcement of right rulings and the execution of righteous judgments. What would the American justice system do if you were faced with the same charges and accusations? Cultural theft alone is an indictment and requires our commitment to dismantling any structures that would outright steal from us and perpetuate cultural appropriation, ensuring proper attribution, representation, and restitution should be our immediate response. This debt necessitates meaningful efforts to recognize, honor, and amplify our voices, stories, and living traditions, while actively providing resources, opportunities, and platforms for cultural reclamation and preservation. In recognizing this debt and acknowledging the epic time we're in, one, I might add, of biblical proportions, America must confront the truth and deal with the historical and ongoing consequences of its lies and cultural theft. Then it must, if it can, actively work to compensate those harmed based on the true origins of its establishment. Our blood cries out from the ground and is deeply entrenched in America's cultural fabric. It's only a matter of time until the fulfillment of rectifying the cultural erasure and exploitation endured by Black people in the Americas will manifest.